everyone. So my main advice for anatomy this year is this textbook, Moore and Daly Clinically Oriented Anatomy. As you can see, I've bought the actual copy, but you can probably find a PDF online as well. It's a really comprehensive text with some very nice diagrams. It also has these blue pages, which detail some of the key pathologies, injuries, procedures as well related to the anatomy that you'll be learning. And it's really quite high yield and can come up in the exams. So I really recommend everyone to have a glance through before the exams. Personally, what I like to do is I'll read it through once, the relevant chapters, then I'll make some flashcards from whatever information I think I need to know, and then mainly study from these flashcards. I've used both physical flashcards, I have some cards here, as well as Anki, and both work quite well. It's just up to you what you prefer. I also like to draw arteries, veins and lymphatic vessels on a whiteboard, so I've got this here. I got it from Kmart, about $10. It's quite cheap, but it's very worthwhile. The only downside to Moore and Daly's is that sometimes there's a bit too much information and it can be quite hard to know what you do need to know and what you don't need to know. If you're not a fan of that, I'd recommend Teach Me Anatomy, which is a free site and has all the really core concepts, but I personally find that I get a bigger picture idea from the textbook, so I don't use the site as often, but it still can be quite helpful. Overall, just good luck with the anatomy. Take the time to figure out what study techniques and strategies work best for you, and I'm sure you'll all do fantastic.
Hey everyone, it's Rachel, and for my anatomy study tip, I use a combination of 3 different things when I study anatomy. First of all is Anki, as you can see here. Second, I use this, which is Complete Anatomy. And third of all, I use Anatomedia. So first of all, for Anki, I highly recommend Anki for a lot of subjects in medicine, not only anatomy. It's great for pharmacology as well. Not so much some of the conceptual ideas, but it's made for memorization, and that is basically what medicine is, at least in year 1. So what I do in year 1 is I used some pre-made cards that you guys can probably find in your on your Google Drives, and that already separates, these Anki cards already separate everything into like clinical skills, anatomy and histology, and you can just go through these cards by yourself. And how it works is that Anki gives you different cards every day, and they use spaced repetition to basically help you memorize it better, I guess. But it's super helpful and I really recommend that. I also use the anatomy deck, which you can get online. You can just Google Anki anatomy. It's probably in a subreddit somewhere. But this is the anatomy decks are already pre-made decks that give you basically all these images, and you have to label parts of them, which is great for the exam and gives you clinical knowledge, different comments, tells you about relationships and stuff. It's really great. I've been using it since year 1, year 2. It gives you everything you need to know in anatomy without going into too much detail. If you're planning to make your own Anki cards, which I really suggest as well, consider using image occlusion and close deletions. I find those are the best kind of question formats. Okay, now for Complete Anatomy. This app does cost some money, but I think it's really worth it, especially in year 1, because you get to visualize the relationships of different muscles and organs in the body, which are super important, because you may know that this is the transversus abdominis, but you don't know how it sits in relation to other things. It's great because you can have different systems of the body that you turn on and turn off, and it's just great, I guess. It's great to visualize anatomy, especially since you guys don't have any practical sessions this year. It's great to see the human body like this. An alternative is Digital, which is for free online. And last of all, Anatomedia is free to use, and the faculty gives you access. Just make sure to log in through your Monash, through Monash Uni, not through the actual page. So, modules. Basically, when you go into Anatomedia, it gives you different parts of the body, which is aligned to what you guys are learning. So upper limb first, and it's amazing because it gives you imaging and dissections, which again you guys won't have this year. And this really helps to relate your understanding of different parts of the body to, I guess, different pathologies, and it gives you these kind of stuff. It gives you good labels and just great explanations that you can use. Supplementing this, you can also use Radiopedia if you want more imaging, which is just another website, and Teach Me Anatomy is a great anatomy site as well. So I hope this helps you all, and good luck with your studies.
Hi, my name is Malika, and so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what resources I use to study anatomy and some general tips. So the main one I use is Teach Me Anatomy. It's really good because it gives a basic summary of everything, and it's also got good subheadings. So I'll split things up into sections. So say for upper limb, it'll have muscles, bones, joints, areas, nerves, vascular supply, and then under those it's got subheadings, so it's really easy to break down. And then it's also useful because at the end of most sections they generally have an area for pathologies, so it'll have a couple of common ones maybe and a brief summary so that you're more familiar with the words. To help with this, I usually use CanHub as well. CanHub is like Teach Me Anatomy, so it's got a lot of info about the basic muscles, nerves, joints, but it goes into a lot more detail than Teach Me Anatomy does. So I don't tend to use it straight away because it can get quite overwhelming, but I find it useful to use for tutorial questions or on subjects that you know you're going to need a bit more info on. And I also use Biodigital, so that helps to view like the muscles, the bones, the vasculature, and break it down so you can see what it looks like. And I think something like that would especially help, given that you can't like go see the specimens or bodies in real life to see what it looks like. In terms of general anatomy tips, I found that drawing things out from memory helped, such as drawing the nerves or the blood supply out, and then just doing that a couple of times with notes and then repeating it until I got it by memory. And then, so that helps me memorize how to draw them out. And then also, it'll help linking them with clinical pathologies later on, because that's really important. Another thing is teaching people helps, because I find when I teach people, it helps you make connections between things and helps you come up with some sort of like generalizations, like this nerve innervates all the muscles in this compartment rather than just looking at each muscle individually. And it makes it a lot easier to remember that way rather than remembering every single muscle, every single bone, because there's so many of them to remember. So I hope that helps, and good luck with anatomy.
Hey guys, this is Isabel from PSPupper, and I'm gonna share with you how I study for anatomy. So this could easily be like half an hour long video, but I'm going to condense everything. And essentially, the crux of it is don't get bogged down in the details. Just focus on the clinical aspects of everything, because it'll firstly make it a lot easier to learn, and secondly, be a lot more interesting. A lot of people don't like anatomy because they focus on like every single itty bitty detail, and it's just like literally just rote memorizing everything, and that can be a lot of information to take in, and it's very draining and takes a lot of time. And I'm not saying anatomy doesn't take time. Anatomy does take quite a lot of time, but it makes a lot more sense if you can visualize it in your head and understand why it's important to know. So the whole point of learning anatomy is it's basically a foundation on which you can build clinical importance and understand why it's important. So the way I like to learn anatomy is honestly by YouTube. I'm not a big fan of like textbooks and all that, because I can't read something and understand how all the anatomical relationships work. I'm quite an audio-visual learner. I like people like telling me things, because I remember them if people tell me. So I get YouTube to tell me. So I'm just going to quickly share the screen. Here is YouTube. So as you can see, I just looked up anatomy of the shoulder. So how I guide my learning is using the anatomy workbook, and you'll get the anatomy workbook at the start of semester, and it's tailored by faculty to every single week of the Monash Med anatomy course, although it might be a bit fucked because of Corona. But so always study anatomy in advance. Always look at it the weekend before the week starts, because you're going to go to class and they're going to kind of expect you to know at least some of this before, when you rock up. They're not going to teach it to you. They're going to expect that you know it and that you've studied it. So I was told this a lot by second years last year, and I did not understand that they literally just show up, put you in a room, and it's like, go for it. It's not going to be as bad because it's on Zoom, so they'll like explain it a bit more because they can't just let you roam free. But it is important to kind of at least have a good overview of everything. So in terms of overviews, I will click on, so yeah, literally just look up anatomy of the shoulder or anatomy of, the upper arm, or the forearm, and you get anatomy zone, Ken Hub. This guy is fucking amazing. Watch this video. It's so good. When you get to arm muscles, watch this video. It's gonna be linked in our doc. It's a really great video for remembering the arm muscles, and I didn't see it until SWOT back. So literally just look up exactly what you're researching, what you're focusing on for the week, and you can figure that out by going to the anatomy workbook and just taking a look at like what words there are for that week, what lists of muscles and stuff they want you to know, because it's it'll help you figure out what you're looking at, and just look it up on YouTube, watch the whole video. So the first thing you do is I like to just put it on 2x speed and just watch the entire video through, because it helps me get like a good overview of everything that we need to know, all the stuff that's how everything's related, and also just help me lay out my notes better because I know everything that's going to be included. So I'll watch the whole video, and then I'll go back and then slowly go through and take notes on everything, because if you take notes on every single thing as you go through the first time, you are going to forget everything by the time you get to the end of the video. By the time you get to here, you'll have forgotten everything that happened here, or like what it means, or what the words are. Because I find watching the whole thing through, at least the words are familiar to you. At least you've heard the words at least once before. And then when you come back to it, it becomes less scary, because you're like, oh yeah, I remember that word from the first time I watched through it. I'm not saying you're going to remember everything from the first time you watched through it. Of course, it's like half of it's going to go in one ear and out the other ear, but at least it looks familiar, so then it's not as scary. So that's honestly the main thing I like to do. I like to watch YouTube videos and then go through and take notes on it. And then once I'm done, I'll go back to the anatomy workbook and make sure I've covered everything. I'll make sure I know all the words. If there's anything that is on the list that I don't know, I'll Google it. And then I'll go through all the questions in the anatomy workbook and try to answer them. You will find that a lot of the questions you actually won't be able to answer even if you have memorized all the anatomy, because it's all clinical relevance, and suddenly you're like, oh, I see why learning all the details doesn't do anything for clinical anatomy, because it's more like, if someone fell over on their hand and they landed like this, how would they break their hand? And you're like, bro, I don't know, I just know that a bone's there. And this is the kind of stuff that you have to Google and understand the clinical relevance for. That's pretty much it. That's pretty much how I learned anatomy, and I hope this was helpful for some people. And if anyone else is an audiovisual learner, hope you can have a go at it.